Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Movies in a Podshell podcast, the podcast which takes one great film and couples it with a classic movie from another era. I mean, this week it's not another era, but who cares? This week's pick anyway is In Bruges from 2008 by Martin McDonagh. I'm joined as usual by my co-host, the dude, but you can call him Johnny. How's it going, Johnny?
Oh, we'll be having a chat about that name when we talk about that film.
You're going to upset people this week, I've got a feeling. You are going to upset people this week.
I think it's fair to say this is the first week we're disagreeing on a film, which I think is good. I think it's good to disagree.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, we can't all have sunshine and lollipops because sometimes you're wrong and I'm right.
I mean, yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
Well, anyway... Well, go on. What are you saying, Johnny?
I was just going to say, what have you been watching this week? I'm curious.
I've not watched much, but I'll tell you what I have watched. Hard Target, directed by John Woo, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't. But if you've got it on Blu-ray, I want you to mail it me because I want to get into some John Woo Mission Impossible 2 action.
Okay, I have got it on Blu-ray, of course. What was it you said last week? Do you ever watch a film? Can you ever watch a film if you don't own it on Blu-ray? The answer is pretty much no, apart from this week's Pairing film, which I couldn't get on 4K.
But on the flip side, you will watch it in a hotel room on a laptop on Blu-ray. That is the caveat to that.
I'll watch I'll watch a film I don't care about in a hotel on a laptop. Don't start throwing your stones when you're in a glass house, Jonathan. Anyway, yeah, Hard Target by John Woo. Mm-hmm. Really good. It's ridiculous. It's exactly what you'd expect from John Woo. He also, obviously, I talk about it all the time. He directed a film called Hard Boil and The Killing with Chow Yun-fat. He's an action specialist. I have also been watching The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. I've now finished season 1. I did want to speak to you about this because I know you finished all of it. I know it's not a film, but I must say, can I just say it's a really well-produced TV show with quite engaging characters, but the plot is paper thin, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with that, but a lot of it for that film is about it being in the Star Wars world, and I think you raise a valid point. So we did speak very briefly about it this morning, which was if it wasn't a Star Wars product, I don't think it would be as successful as it is. It's the fact you're looking at Boba Fett's armor, and I know, okay, Mandalorian armor, and you're seeing there's a Greedo in the background, there's a lightsaber, or what have you. And I can't lie, I love seeing all the old used future elements from A New Hope in a TV series, and a lot of the reason I like The Mandalorian is on a technical level, the way they've made it. This whole thing where the shift away from green screen and the shift to these massive LED. Do you know about this?
Well, can I just say that I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the first season. It wasn't the 10 I was expecting because everyone was raving about it. The action sequences are great. But what you've just said, the physical effects, that you can tell they've moved away from green screen. It looks gorgeous. I don't know what's this. So what's the LED thing?
So it's really cool. So basically, imagine. Did you see the film Oblivion? Tom Cruise.
I've seen it once.
Okay, so
I've seen it once, but I can't remember it really.
He lives in the film. It's in the future, and he's on this sky deck. And around the sky deck, rather than have they built a set of this sky deck, but rather than use a green screen and have all the green spill and on all the reflections because it's a really clean modern building, they said, why don't we just build a massive LED screen and put a real sky on it, and then it will emit the light that would come from the sky. So that's
really cool.
I wouldn't say it's cheaper because building the massive LED screen's an issue, but what's advanced now is that was just using the light to affect the way the reflections on the set. Okay, what they've shifted to now is the backgrounds are CGI made in the Unreal Engine, and what it can do is you film someone on a lot, and it's like a 180 degree lot, and the backdrop is this LED screen, but when you move a camera, everything moves on an axis, right? So when the camera moves, the background would shift. So if you just had a picture, it wouldn't work if you moved. Does that make sense? In the 3D space.
Yeah.
So the computer tracks where the camera is and adjust for where the stuff should be. So if you've got a small set, it can look massive from the way it moves and positions. It's next level stuff. And I think Lucasfilm, this was kind of a pet project for Mandalorian. How do we make a TV show? We can't afford to do the green screen all the time. This was the solution. But as I said, I don't think it's taken over in mainstream films or anything as of yet, because it's so expensive to get this space up. But it means they can have a bit of a practical set in front of them, the floor as sand, but then the rest of the backdrop, the rest of it is this CGI that's already been made and the camera panning through it. It is the future of where things are going, but it's way cost prohibitive right now. But even in corporate production, you are starting to see people use it for the big backdrops.
That's crazy. Do you know what's really funny? You've just literally rattled all that off. We have not had any preview of that conversation whatsoever. I just mentioned Mandalorian. Johnny just happened to know a bunch of stuff about it. So,
and also as
thank you.
A really cool thing they've done to capture the spirit of Star Wars. There's a lot of the shots of the I've forgotten the name of the lead ship in the Mandalorian. I apologize, but the lead ship, they actually filmed a model of it. So they went and did the old school technique with a DSLR camera and shot it that way.
That's really cool.
Put it on the blue screen. You key out the blue screen into the software and then you enhance it with CG. And they said because they had a proper model for reference, the lighting is far more realistic. And it's true that the CGI in The Mandalorian looks a hell of a lot better than it ever did in the prequels. But I don't mean to prequel bash. Those films are old now. The CG, they were making them from 1997 onwards, right? So, realistically, it was...
90 CG does look bad.
Yeah, a lot of it does. And a lot of early... The thing that I find frustrating with the prequels, again, I don't know how we got another episode, we're talking about Star Wars prequels, but by the Revenge of the Sith, they just nailed the look of the CG and it looked photoreal. And it's a shame they weren't at that level for the first two. And of all the things George Lucas goes back and changes in his Star Wars cuts, I just wish he'd go back to the first two prequels with a load of money, update that CGI. It wouldn't make them better.
Change the script and that, go back and change the script and change everything about them.
No, but honestly, you joke about all the changes he has made on those films, and he batched on a load of CGI in 1997 to the original trilogy and has rarely updated that. And I just think, I don't know, it's just weird what he picks to change or not. However, I'm glad you have watched The Mandalorian. Season 2, I think personally has more of a story for you to get involved in. So
I did enjoy it, and I just thought that the plot could have been a bit more in depth. I felt like it was very monster of the week. Yeah. And like I said last night, I expect that from 1990s Buffy the Vampire Slayer 22 episode season. I don't expect it from an 8 episode condensed season when the episodes are between 35 minutes and 45 minutes long. Why are we seeing monster of the week? It's just bizarre.
Because I think the idea of The Mandalorian was the original Star Wars was the idea of a modern fairy tale in the future, but also it had a lot of elements of the samurai and the Western genre. So what this is doing is the same thing. It's like he walks in and solves a problem for the good of the people nearly every week. That is basically the story of The Mandalorian. And then there'll be an overarching storyline of helping someone else, and each week it's like a video game. Here's this little bit and you get your next bit of armor, or here's your little bit and this leads to the next story link in the thing. So I think they were trying to keep it simple, and to be honest, that's actually why I enjoy it. And I think we were speaking to Peter about it, and he said the same thing, being able to actually just take it a week at a time and it be a small chunks, actually quite nice.
Seeing different places, and when you said that, the point you've just made, the point Pete made, that's why it's really good to share these things, because it made me think about it a little bit differently, and I was a bit more accepting of it. So not for a second was I saying it was bad. Like, so I did really enjoy it. I just thought, I was expecting a little bit more from only an 8 episode season. But anyway, it's finished. I will watch season 2 because I did enjoy it. And that's all I've been watching this week. The tables have turned. Johnny, I know you've been watching stuff. Tell me.
So for the first time in a while, I haven't been watching a Harry Potter film this week. So that's the number one start. No, I watched 2 black and white films completely by chance. So one of them was modern though, which was The Lighthouse, which I think we had spoken about briefly before. I think you.
Yeah, I think I was raving about it.
Seen it at the cinema probably before.
Anyway, yeah, I've seen it at the Electric Cinema. Mm-hmm. It was really, I really loved it.
Yeah, so what I loved about that film, I won't go into spoilers because it's quite a recent film. I managed to watch it on Now TV, so if you do have Now TV, that's where you can watch it at the moment, and it's obviously available for rent at other places. I really enjoyed the fact that it's very atmospheric from the moment one. It's a really repressive atmosphere. It's the noise of the lighthouse and the noise of just keeping this thing going. And there's certain films where you just feel instantly from the start that everything's going to go wrong and everything feels off even when things are good. And it really drew you into the world, because one of the first scenes is William Dafoe's taking a dump while Robert Pattinson sat next to him finishing his bedpan, and then walks away and farts, and it just kind of sets the tone for this is it makes you feel what a horrible place to be just by a noise, and it's like a drop and then a jump.
It's not even in a funny way either. It's like, you know when a fart in a film is usually like, oh, that's funny. It's a fart like in a film, like where it's just like you're sitting there and you're like, that is horrible. And you feel
like you can smell it. You can't, but it feels grimy. But some of the I
love how you clarified that you can't smell it.
No. So the film,
4DX.
The film is 4:3 aspect ratio, which is unusual in itself, as well as being black and white. And this shouldn't put you off, people, because if you're going to be watching Justice League, it's now in 4:3 aspect ratio as well. So you might as well get used to it. But no,
on that Snyder cut.
Yeah, some of the camera moves are so intricate. It's lovely seeing a black and white picture, but with modern camera techniques is, I think, what I'm trying to get across. And the cinematography is stunning, and I hope that from the films we've linked with recently, people are, so I know some people are really averse to watching black and white films, and watching stuff like this will hopefully help you see why they can still be beautiful and they have their own style.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a few modern black and white films that you could watch to get yourself into it. You can even watch some films that were presented in color in black and white now. So you've got the chance to watch Mad Max Fury Road, which is available in black and white, and you can also watch Parasite, which is available in black and white again. But yeah, there's quite a few black and white films you can watch. You've got I think Alfonso Cuarón's Roma in black and white, which is actually it's a bit more of an art house film. Art house pretty much equals boring to your average viewer, and kind of me. I'm not really a huge fan of Roma, but it's a beautiful film in terms of how it's presented. Yeah, there is a few modern.
And I also watched Dr. Strangelove after discussing Kubrick last week. I kind of carried on the theme. Again, this one's on Now TV at the moment for anyone who does want to watch it. It's a really strange film. I really enjoyed it, but I can't really describe it. It's very odd. It's like
the tone.
The tone is very strange. It's kind of showing you how crazy the idea of war is and how ridiculous the Cold War was and the whole situation. But I sent you a picture and I said, guess what film I'm watching? And you said, either Dr. Strangelove or Austin Powers. And that's what it's going for, because it's the same set designer as the first few Bond films, actually. It's Kubrick.
Right, okay.
So there is a link.
Yeah.
But yeah, really enjoyed that. Again, much like, it's very different in tone to Full Metal Jacket, but it has that kind of, it's a satirical take on it, but certain characters in it are very serious, then other characters are very melodramatic and over the top, and I find that tone sometimes quite hard. For this, it did work. I've heard
it's great. I've heard really good things about it.
I think you'd enjoy it. It's not a particularly long film either. In my head, I think it was only about an hour and 40 minutes, which I know this is bad, but when we're doing the podcast, if we can watch more shorter films, I don't know, it just seems easier, because watching 2 films a week and then watching the additional ones on top, it can feel like you're strapped for time. So when we get these hour and 40 pictures in, it feels like an absolute win, doesn't it?
I love a 90-minute movie. I say it all the time that 90-minute movies is my favourite length.
Do you know,
it's perfect. You don't need any more.
When I was younger, though, I had this thing, which is if a film wasn't at least 2 hours long, it was bad. And the reason I made this logic up, and I'm happy to know why this isn't true, is because Austin Powers Goldmember was 90 minutes, and I thought the reason it was a bad film for me was because it was 90 minutes long. I didn't associate the idea of length didn't exactly equal quality in terms of the output.
Well, and you know, I've thought about this lately. All I do now, because obviously I work full time, I just look at the runtime of everything. Whereas, I was thinking the other day, I couldn't tell you the runtime of anything when I was a teenager, because time isn't an issue.
Yeah.
So when I was a teenager, I wouldn't even consider the runtime before I put it on. But now you must consider it, because it's like, right, is this gonna finish before 10:30?
Yeah.
Because I need to be in beddy buys, because I've got an early start in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a strange concept.
Also, I have this bad thing recently where I say, well, I could watch so many episodes of this program or watch a film, and I think that's something we contend with more now because of streaming platforms putting series all up at once and kind of wanting to get ahead of it before it gets leaked online, or you see something you don't want to see with plot reveals. So a film kind of Do you know what I mean? I just think...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I fully understand what you mean. Let's get into the main body of the show. Just like every week, we grab a film, we grab it with our hands. No, we don't. But we take a film. This week's film, as we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, is In Bruges from 2008, written and directed by Martin McDonagh.
For 2 weeks, in Bruges, in a room like this, with you? No way. You're about the worst tourist in the whole world.
Maybe that's what hell is. The entire rest of eternity spent in Bruges.
Johnny, had you seen it before? What did you think of it?
So I saw this film with my dad years and years ago, and I'll be completely honest, I'd forgotten about it. I hadn't really got any memory of it. I remembered Colin Farrell was in Bruges, and that was my limit of it.
Right.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's not my usual kind of film, actually, to be honest, in terms of tone. I think you're more into gangster flicks and that kind of thing, and this isn't a gangster picture, but that world, let's say.
Oh, absolutely. You know, yeah, this is definitely more my kind of thing.
And I just really, really enjoyed it. We'll delve into why, but few things off the bat as the overview. It's shot beautifully. Every shot of it, the lighting, everything is just stunning. Bruges' location is amazing and works really well as a metaphor for what they're talking about, which we'll delve more into. But also, Colin Farrell just being in his actual accent, I think really helps it. Rather than hearing him do American, and that's not because he can't do an American accent, but it's just really nice when you see an actor use their native accent for a change.
A quick little tidbit for you, actually. So originally, Martin McDonagh wrote it, and he intended for it to be two British people, but then he had Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson on set, who are both Irish, and he's like, just let them do it because it's let them be Irish because it just makes everything easier.
So I should say, had you seen it before? I'm pretty sure you had seen it.
Yeah, I'd seen it before. Yeah, I owned it on DVD. I've now got it on Blu-ray. I really did love the film. I think this time round, I loved it even more. And I think I appreciated the script more. It's probably one of the best scripts that I've heard. And maybe that's because I'm just fresh off the bat, but I just find it hilarious from start to finish. Not particularly politically correct, but it was 2008, and it's really, really funny. And Martin McDonagh is he's notorious for writing those kind of like, it's a black comedy. So yeah, what about you, Johnny? What did you think of the script?
I think it's what amazes me is how it makes you feel for these characters, even though they're people I wouldn't want to know, if that makes sense. So they're two people who I would not want to have any connotation with or any link to at all. But it makes you feel sympathetic towards them. And at the start of the film, it kind of introduced them in a very offhand manner, so you don't really get to know what they're about. And the film's really good at gradually revealing who these people are. And at one point you think, well, I really don't like them. And then you feel sympathetic towards them. And by the end, you want them to be redeemed through the actions of the film. And I think that, to me, is good writing, to take someone who I don't want to be associated with and then make me really care about them. And then, without getting into the ending, and feel for what does occur. I think that, to me, is good writing. But also, such good performances. Brendan Gleeson is brilliant as Ken. I've not seen him in anything else, to be honest, apart from as Mad-Eye Moody. I really haven't seen him.
Funny you mention that, right? Can I just mention, is this the film outside Harry Potter with the most Harry Potter characters in it together? Do you know how many there are?
So you've got Fleur Delacroix, who's Chloe in the film. You've got Ralph Fiennes, obviously Voldemort. You've got Brendan Gleeson as Ken. Colin Farrell, who was then in, what do you call it? Fantastic Beasts.
Fantastic Beasts. Yeah,
you've probably got more. I don't know.
Well, then you've actually got you've also got the priest who Colin Farrell shoots. That's the mission he was on. He is actually Aberforth Dumbledore. So there's actually five. Yeah, there's 5 people that were in a Harry Potter film, right? And so the Goblet of Fire was actually made before this. It's crazy, yeah. Yeah, it was, yeah. So it's really interesting. So the film is a comedy, first and foremost. It's a black comedy, and then it turns really dark. So it begins with basically Brendan Gleeson's character and Colin Farrell's character, Ray and Ken, and they're sort of walking around Bruges. Brendan Gleeson's character is really enjoying himself, going to see the sights, and Colin Farrell's character, Ray, is really hating every moment of it, and he just wishes he was back in London having a pint. And so at that one point it turns really dark, and they've got like quite good camaraderie. It's really funny, and it turns dark. It shows a flashback of actually what happened. So Ken, Brendan Gleeson's character, brought Colin Farrell's character in as a hitman, and it was Ray, who is Colin Farrell's character. It was his first job, and he goes to kill a priest. And so he's in the priest, and he's in the confession, and he says, "Oh, well, what have you done?" And he said, I think he says, "I've killed a priest."
That's it. Yeah.
No, I've killed. He's something along those lines. But anyway, the priest runs out, and Colin Farrell follows him. He shoots the priest in the back, but in front of the priest was a child that he didn't see, and he ends up killing the child. So and all of a sudden, it goes from this really funny black comedy to quite a somber moment, doesn't it? Like,
it's brutal.
You actually
see the shot.
You see the bullet. Yeah, you see the bullet go into the child's head, and it's horrible. It's awful, isn't it?
I think as well, a black comedy should shock you, because what it does is it makes you accept that these situations are funny that you wouldn't normally find funny, and you kind of get in that world, and then it brings you straight back down to earth by saying, yeah, but look what they did. You know, I think Tarantino does that as well.
Absolutely.
With his films, that kind of the writing style.
Yeah, he does 100%. And what other, have you seen other Martin McDonagh films, Johnny?
No, I haven't, and I'm annoyed about this because I really wanted to watch Three Billboards before we came onto the podcast, but unfortunately I couldn't get it on any of the platforms. I've got the app for seeing what we can watch things on, and at the moment I'm not having a good run of watching anything which is on any of those apps, but I shall be watching it, and I'm hoping we'll probably end up doing an episode, not for a while because we've got so much to get through, but I would imagine from what I've read and what I've seen, I think I will like both of those other two films, so I'd be keen to talk.
Seven Psychopaths as well. Yeah. And they're both very much, he has got that, you can see that more in Seven Psychopaths. I would say that Three Billboards is slightly separate, still very, very funny.
I was going to say the thing I really enjoy about the film though is it's the use of the location, because the film has a lot of Catholic iconography throughout it, and what we learn throughout the story is they've selected Bruges for this reason, because the story's about redemption, isn't it? So we learn...
Yes, it's about morality, it's about consequences, yeah.
We see this horrible, horrible thing happen, but we actually learn the reason he was sent to put a hit out on that priest was because he had been interfering with other children. That is made abundantly clear. That is why the hit was taken out. And Brendan Gleeson's character Ken says to him, yes, you killed one boy and it's unforgivable. However, the reason you were sent there, and think about all the boys you've saved. And it's a weird morality, weird ethical question to put in front of you, and you think about, and it's difficult. It's really difficult. And I don't know, it just stops and it, as you said, shocks you into thinking about something you wouldn't even ever consider and try.
It adds so much depth to the film. Like, it adds so much depth to what appears to be just a comedy about two hitmen. And when all those pieces come together, they're in actually this church at one point, and they're looking at a painting which is actually really, really important. And Brendan Gleeson's character is actually saying, well, so Colin Farrell again is really upset about being in there. He really doesn't want to be there. He just wants to go for a beer.
Just to clarify, when Colin Farrell's being a pain in the arse, he's like a 14-year-old me on holiday, because my parents used to take me around lots of churches and these kind of things, and if I didn't want to be there, I was also the stroppy teenager in the corner. But Colin Farrell at this point's in his 30s, and he's making his chair screech as loudly as possible while he's in the church, or he's like shuffling his feet or slamming along, just
exactly,
making himself be known, because the whole point is they're lying low as well, so every time he's making himself seen, it kind of defeats the object of why they're in Bruges anyway.
And Colin Farrell takes interest in a certain painting. So the painting's actually Hieronymus Bosch, and it's about the final day on earth, and so Brendan Gleeson then explains to Colin Farrell, they're judged for all the crimes they've committed, and shortly that's why you see like him acting so odd and uptight. He's dealing with the death of the child. He's absolutely riddled with guilt, and there's like you'll notice that there's Bosch symbolism throughout the film. And it almost suggests that Bruges is the waiting period, like purgatory. And it's really like that is, remember, like, bear this in mind for when we talk about the end of the film, because that piece about that painting is super, super important.
Yeah, Bruges is literally a visual metaphor for purgatory, and the whole thing is, the idea of purgatory is you're between two places, and literally the killers are between two places. They're waiting for their next job, potentially, or to go back home. They don't know. But also, the whole time, Colin Farrell's character Ray is looking back on his sins throughout, which is this murder. He's not bothered about the murder of the priest. He's quite easy to live with that. It's the murder of the child, and he's waiting for his day of reckoning, I suppose, by being in Bruges. And he's depressed, isn't he? We discovered his character is depressed, and he is suicidal, really.
Well, absolutely, he can't live with himself anymore. And then, so this all, they've had their terrible first day, and they end up, so Colin Farrell's character just he ends up going out and just getting drunk, and they both end up going out getting drunk, and they stumble across this movie set, and they're out for the night, but they should have been waiting on a phone call from a guy called Harry, who's their boss,
who's played by Ralph Fiennes.
Who is perfect, absolutely perfect.
He plays a very over the top theatrical Cockney. But he what's his character called? Sorry, is it
Harry?
Harry's big thing is he's got this moral code. So he's kind of deals with the fact of being a serial killer, because I say serial killer, a hitman, however you want to say it, because of the fact that he lives by a code. So the priest dies because of what he did to other people, and we find out later he helps Ken get in the hitman scene for something that happened to a person in his life. So it's eye for an eye is kind of what he believes in. He believes in an eye for an eye, let's say.
Yeah.
And then, but if you cross the barrier, which is you kill children, then you are struck off. You can't live with his code. And his moral code becomes really important at the end of the film, because his big moral code is you can't get away with killing kids, which feeds in all the way to the end of the film, which we will get to.
Absolutely, yeah. And this film, we're doing more of a play-by-play this week, because this film kind of does warrant it. We're not going to spend too much time on certain parts, but we will sort of it is important to go through the sequence. After this sort of happens, they stumble across this movie set, and Colin Farrell's character sees this girl, Chloe, who he really, really likes, and he gets a date with her. And then they go back to the hotel, and they're in the hotel, and they've missed a phone call. So they've missed a phone call from Harry. He says, "Well, you're not." And they read the what is it? A message.
Like the note.
He leaves a message with a woman that owns the place, and he calls her a secretary. And he's really like demeaning towards her. He's like, "What weren't you when I asked you?" And it's this basically this monologue, and it's really, really funny. And then Brendan Gleeson's like, "Oh no, we weren't in. We're gonna get in so much trouble. Like, you better be in tomorrow night." Like, and so they do stay in the next night, and in the end, sort of, Ralph Fiennes answers the phone as Harry. No, he calls him up, and he says, it's almost like that Snatch dialogue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the key thing is for this, when the second call comes in, Ray's already organised to go on a date. So
that's it, yeah.
He basically says, "Well, we only need one of us in to accept the phone call." So, you know, when we actually get the phone call, Ken is in on his own in the room, but he has to pretend that he's not on his own in the room, and that he then sends Colin Farrell's character away to go out, because Ralph Fiennes' character doesn't want to hear Colin Farrell to hear him on the phone. It's just, it's brilliant. It's really good.
It's so funny. Think if you've seen the film Sexy Beast with Ben Kingsley. Think that when you're thinking of this character, and he's saying, "Oh, I went to Bruges when I was 7. It's lovely. All the cobbled streets. It's a fairy tale town." And so he's sort of led Ken into like a false sense. Is it Ray? Who's Brendan Gleeson's character?
Ken. Yeah, Ken.
Yeah, so Ken, he leads Ken into a false sense of security at this point, and Ken's like, "Oh, is he really enjoying it? I really want him to enjoy it." And so Ken's like, "Well, no, actually, I don't think it's his type of thing, but I'm really having fun." He's like, "What do you mean it's not his type of thing? It's a fairy tale town." And he starts going absolutely mad. He's like, "Oh, no. I mean, when I mean it's not this type of thing, is It's just the motorways when you get off when you get off
the plane.
Motorways.
Yeah. There wasn't a motorway when I came in there. There's not a dual carriageway into Bruges. It's really
hysterical
funny.
Conversation.
But also, what's brilliant in this scene is before the phone rings, Ray is watching the TV, and when he's watching Ken is watching the TV, and when he's watching the TV, it's
Orson Welles.
It's Orson Welles. And it's
Touch of Evil.
The famous one take. And then the phone conversation that then happens with Ken and with Ralph Fiennes' character is all one take. And I didn't even notice that the first time until I read it on the trivia. And I went, oh, yeah, that's true. Because I was so drawn into the performance, I didn't really think about it, which I think is great,
Yeah. I mean, what, like, so while sort of Ken's getting a really hard time, Ray's out on a date, like, and really enjoying himself. And there's an altercation with a Canadian man that is one of the funniest parts of the whole film for me. I won't really go into it because I can't without offending people, but it's really, really funny. And then he goes back with Chloe and they start getting it on. And at this point then, like, it's obviously a setup, and this French guy comes in and sticks a gun in the back of his head.
Because basically Chloe does this setup, which is, that's the characters on the date with. Chloe has this setup, which is she gets tourists to take her out on dates, invites them back to the house, and then just as things are about to kick off, she has someone storm the room and they rob them, essentially.
Yeah, but Ray wouldn't let that happen, would he? Of course he wouldn't let that happen. And it makes for another really, really funny scene. And after all this goes on, they have him, and so essentially we forget to mention that Harry, on the their boss, is on the phone to Ken and actually says to Ken, look, he's killed a kid, you need to kill him. Get a gun from X place. And he's got to go, and obviously Ken's really upset at this point. And then they meet up together, Ken and Ray, and they go on a night of coke, acid, and prostitutes.
Yeah. We learn a lot at this point, but before, I think we are in play-by-play territory, and I don't mean to. It's really hard with this film because of the way the reveals happen. It's difficult to jump around it. But what I would say is Colin Farrell's character Ray is so depressed that before he goes on the date, he's literally repeatedly touched his face to try and feel something, because he said previously on a park bench that he can't feel anything since he killed the child. Because he says this to Ken.
I actually didn't notice that. That's really, really
he's
interesting.
Like touching his face, and then it's really.
I wondered why he was doing that.
Yeah, and then it's really sad because the only good thing for him in Bruges is Chloe. And then when he finds out Chloe's just gone out with him on this date to set him up, he then says, I knew it was too good to be true. And she says, what? And he said, oh, I knew someone nice like you wouldn't like me. But then she actually falls for him because he says that. But he's just so devastated because she's the first thing that's made him feel, admittedly in a short period of time. And it really affects him when he finds out that she was only doing it to set him up, essentially. But then after that, it is all kind of resolved because she actually says to him, I will see you again.
Yeah, and it finishes with, after this sort of coke, acid, and this drug-fueled night, they're steaming it. The morning after, Ray, I really sort of, this like fully resonated with me. Like Ray's like lying in bed crying, and it's like, that depression you get after you've been on a night out and you've had way too many drinks, and you just like you get that, what is it, the beer fear they call it. Well, you're just like really worried in the morning.
Yeah, you just kind of say I will never drink again until the following week, and then it happens again anyway.
Exactly, yeah, and he's literally, there's a tear rolling down his face. That's what I took from that anyway. But then so next day, Ken goes to get the gun. He goes to kill him in the park. He goes to kill Ray in the park, but Ray's already there with a gun to his own head, about to kill himself. And
what's brilliant about this scene is the tension is we see. The sad thing is that Ray, Colin Farrell's character Ray, is at the park, and he's at a children's park because he's thinking about what he's done. And he's got, we don't see it initially, he's got a pistol. We see it from Ken's perspective. So Ken's sneaking up onto Ray, and we see, one thing I would say is Ken pulls the gun out a long time before he gets to Colin Farrell in the open, but he storms over to him, and we follow the gun's perspective, and we think, oh God, he's going to get him. But then just as he's about to go and pull the trigger, Colin Farrell puts the gun to his own head, and Ken stops him, because Ken says to him, "What are you doing? You shouldn't be shooting yourself." And Ken before didn't want to kill him, and I don't think he would have followed it through even if he was going to kill himself. But maybe it's the realization that he is in such a bad place, and he believes because he knows he's done wrong, because Ray knows he's done wrong, Ken believes that he can be redeemed. And again, with the Catholic ideology, iconography we see throughout the film is this idea of redemption and the moral codes that they're discussing. So he decides that forget about Harry's rules that we talked about at the start. This kid deserves to be redeemed. And actually, by not shooting Ray, Ken himself feels redeemed. We find out on the drug-fueled evening that James discussed that Ken's wife died, and Harry gave him the opportunity to go and kill his wife's killer. So he is indebted to Harry. He knows he's a bad person, but he is indebted to him because of the fact he helped him get through that phase in his life. But he's not happy with what he does. But with Colin Farrell's character Ray, he sees a younger version of himself and says, you can have a new life. You're young enough to go and do something else. Do it, go anywhere. I'm going to put you on a train, get you out of Bruges, and I'll deal with Harry and the consequences. And after he makes this decision, his character Ken, he looks visibly better. He's not so uptight all the time, and their rapport gets a lot better as well, doesn't it? The way they deal with each other. It's a really weird, sweet relationship between the two of them, which is really hard to describe till you see the film, because it's very odd.
Yeah, and after what we've spoken about the fact that the film is a film about redemption and morality, and that looking through it with a kind of religious lens, I never had watched it in this way before, so it's really interesting to now come to it and watch it and look out for these things. So if you have seen it before, rewatch it again, and I promise you'll get so much more from it this time. And there's actually there's more we can go into like towards the end, because that's when it really all comes to a head.
I was going to say the other thing we've talked about, haven't spoke about actually, is they go to an art museum together, and Ray is hating the art museum, like absolutely hating it. But they see multiple paintings, but I think we've talked about the one at the church, but there's other paintings linked to purgatory and linked to judgment, and talking about all these old-fashioned, in inverted commas, old-fashioned ways that things were dealt with when wrongs were committed, when a wrong thing had been done, let's say. And Ray, this is what preys on Ray the whole time. He's thinking of all this stuff, and I think that is actually what leads to his decision to kill himself. Yeah,
and Ray gets put on a train. Harry is called by Ken and basically told, listen, he's on a train, do what you need to do, but I ain't killing him. And Harry, at this point, you see like the best of Ralph Fiennes, and he's just smashing
his phone.
The phone, absolutely smashing it. And his wife says, Harry, it's an inanimate object. And he's like, you're an inanimate object. And he's like screaming at his wife.
Laughing at that moment. It cracks me up.
Really
as well. It was so funny.
And then he goes in dead calm. He's like, I'm really sorry for calling you an inanimate object. Like, it's actually like, by the way, if we've got any listeners from down South London, I really apologise for my Cockney accent, but I'm doing my best. But that is a really funny part. And anyway, Harry he goes to Bruges straight away, absolutely raging, and you see his journey. You see his journey, that quick journey when he's on the plane, raging. He gets off the plane, raging. He's walking along the bridge, raging.
It's a brilliant
just
montage.
Hilarious.
It reminded me of the montage in Romeo and Juliet with the priest, when you find out where the FedEx letter's gone. Really, really.
Oh, yeah.
Basically condensing in 20 seconds the whole process of
a massive journey.
I think it's brilliant.
Really, really, really funny. He goes to Bruges and he meets Ken, and he meets Ken outside, and they have this conversation, and they're sort of arguing, and at this point now Ken is expecting Harry to kill him, so they go to the tower, and the tower it's been mentioned a couple of times in the film. We haven't mentioned it tonight because we can't go through it all 1 hour 40 minutes anyway. So they go to the tower, and they have this moment at the top of the tower where they're sort of like, Ken is really sort of opening up to Harry and saying, look, I love you, like I really love you, like you're a really good friend and all this. And then Harry kind of also shows a bit of morality at this point now. He comes around to the idea. He's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I can't kill you now, can I? After you said all that nice things, and he shoots him in the leg.
Yeah, which is pretty. But it's basically he. I don't think at any point Harry agrees with the fact that he deserves to be redeemed, that Ray deserves to be redeemed or have a second chance. But he respects Ken enough to not shoot him and stand by him, because that's kind of the shift we get from that. That's the progression, I suppose, of the character.
And so there was something Ray did earlier on in the film, punching a man and punching his wife.
Yeah.
And so this
so the date with Chloe, he basically is what is told before he goes on this date, don't attract any attention. He comes back and he says, how was your evening? He says, well, I punched a woman who tried to attack me with a bottle, and also I shot blanks in the eye of someone who tried to rob me. So in the space of an evening, he's basically done the polar opposite of what he's been told to do.
Yeah, he's had a crazy night. He has been arrested off the train by a Canadian man who he punched. The Canadian man who he punched has gone to the police. He's been arrested off the train and taken back to Bruges, the place where he did not want to go.
Yeah.
At this point now, it's really clever how the jigsaw all comes together. Ray is with Chloe having a date literally across the road from where Ken and Harry are having this argument, and they go up to the tower. And obviously they've been shot. Ken's been shot at this point. Harry's taken him down the tower, sort of like, you deserve this. Like, what else do you expect me to do? And then the Frenchman that's had a blank shot in his eye comes up. He says, Ray's down here. And at this point now, sort of Harry is like, right. And then
going for him.
Ken won't let him leave, and Harry ends up shooting Ken in the neck.
Yeah, but Ken is so adamant that Ray deserves to be redeemed that he's going to try and warn him. So he's about halfway down the staircase of this tower, and he drags himself all the way up to the top of this tower. And when he gets to the top of the tower, he's thinking, I'll shoot down and get him, but it's foggy at the top.
Yeah.
And again, black comedy, the joke is of all nights, it would be foggy on the one evening he needs to see down there. And he has to make a decision. He needs to attract attention and let.
And at this point now, sorry, there's a song by the Dubliners playing.
Oh, it's
and
beautiful.
it's
haunting, actually.
It's such a perfect fit for this moment. Obviously, the Dubliners are an Irish band as well. So this song's playing, and earlier on in the film, he tries to pay to get into this tower with coins.
Yep.
And the man won't let him pay because he's 10 cents short or something. And so he has these coins, and he never would have had the coins. And what he does is he drops the coins from the top of the tower to basically warn the people on the street that he's about to throw himself off.
Yeah. And it makes everyone start to look over that way as well, to attract them that something's about to happen. And then he jumps, he commits suicide. And again, brutal. We see it from a POV perspective, and he lands, and Ray spots him because he's on the date with Chloe. In this moment, when this song's playing, it's almost like it's Ken's swan song. Yeah.
But at the same time, so Ken is plummeting down to earth. Look at it whatever way you want to see it, like whether it's a fall from heaven, a fall from grace, I don't know. But it shows Ray with Chloe, and this is the point in the film where he's truly happy for the first time in the whole film. Like, actually, all is forgotten. They're laughing, they're joking, and there's bright lights in the background. It's like an angelic moment almost, isn't it? Yeah,
100%. And it's we've made the point. Chloe is his light and his way out. Especially after when he gets, again, this film has a massive attention to detail, because earlier on in the film, Chloe gives him a business card because she's the one who gets him out of prison on bail. And again, most films, it would just be she picks him up and it goes, how did they find each other? But this film has such attention to detail that the fact they made her give him a business card earlier on in the film, it was just, I don't know, I love stuff like that when it all knits together perfectly, which this film does.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to spoil the ending, but we're not going to spoil how the ending happens, because that is just too much. But essentially, to leave you with the end of the film, Harry now chases Ray through Bruges, and they're having this big. They've had this big chase. They've had a kind of a shootout, and Harry shoots Ray from quite a distance, shoots him twice or three times, and Ray is now sort of dragging himself through the streets, and he finds himself upon this movie set again.
Yeah.
And upon this movie set, it's important to note that there is a character in the film called Jimmy, who also plays a big part. He's acting in the film, but it is important to note that he's a person of short stature. And the reason why that's important is because in this particular moment, he's dressed as a schoolboy. And so when Harry carries on shooting Ray, it's kind of a parallel to the beginning of the film, because he shoots Ray and the bullets go through him and shoot Jimmy. And Jimmy at this point is dressed as a schoolboy.
Harry looks and he says, oh, okay then, because of his moral code, he accepts the fact that he's preached all along that if you kill a child, you have to die, and he believes he has shot a child himself, so he shoots himself then and there.
Before Harry kills himself, Ray attempts to save Harry at this point by telling him it's not a child, and that's thus redeeming himself. It's almost like, at this point now, for Ray, this is like hell, because he hates Bruges anyway. But for Harry, Harry he's in heaven. It's a fairy tale town.
And also the cinematography, it's snowing at this point because they're on a film set and it's fake snow, which they've got for the film. Yeah,
so it's snowing, and obviously there's a lot of like iconography as well. So
it's like when people have the beak masks. I can't describe it. Like from Masquerade Balls, they're quite creepy.
So it's animal heads and skulls. It mirrors the paintings earlier in the film of Judgment.
Yeah,
and then it all comes full circle. It's so clever, such a poignant end. You don't even find out whether Ray lives or dies.
No,
it's so good. And what about the score as well?
No.
The score is unbelievable throughout, isn't it?
It's really simple. It reminds me of, it's quite similar in my head to the Amelie score, if you can remember that. But in terms of, it's a very simple light motif which you hear throughout the film, and it's you were humming it before we started the podcast today, so it's obviously stuck in your head.
It's still in my head now. I could hum it again, but I won't.
No, we're okay. But there's so much to say about this film, and I would implore all of you, if you have not already seen it, to go and watch it, because it's, as me and Jamie said, it's a film that as a teenager I watched and had a certain level of depth to it, and then watching it this time, viewed it with completely different mindset, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Also, I think what I took from it as well, from the direction, is the fact that apparently the director has quite a background in theatre, with plays delving into issues such as morality, etc., and you can tell for me that it's someone who knows how to work with actors, because all the performances, there's not a bad one in there. It's I don't know, can you think of any person? No,
absolutely not, no. And I think my favourite performance in there is Ralph Fiennes.
Is it?
His character is... Yeah, it is. I just think he's so, maybe because of how much he makes me laugh. Colin Farrell's got a lot of nuance to his performance, but Ralph Fiennes is just hilarious.
I think Colin Farrell is by far the best one in it, because he at the same is trying to output so much. He's trying to show a person who's repressing memories. He's trying to repress the fact that he's suicidal, and he's doing all these things that are outwardly funny, but he's trying too hard. And the point is showing that he's not coping. I don't know. I think previously for me, I've watched other Colin Farrell things where he gets a lot of flack, and then watching something like this, where it's just, would we describe this as a character study? Probably not, but it feels like the amount of time and energy given towards these characters, their motivations and the progression, it feels almost as...
I don't think it's not a far cry. Like it's not. Yeah, it's not a ridiculous idea. Yeah, of course it is. It does follow characters changing throughout a film and trying to redeem themselves. You wouldn't describe the film as a character study, but it is. Like there's definite beelines into that.
And I know we've said this before, but I must reiterate, the Bruges location is fantastic. It looks stunning, and the cinematography is just gorgeous. It's just a really great film. It's nice because I think for me, from what I know about this was quite a cult film. Really, I don't think it had a massive release. I know it was in conjunction with...
No, it's released. It was a film. It's a film 4. Film 4. Released it, they're not exactly the biggest distributor, but they mostly distribute really, really good films. Obviously, they don't have the same prestige as a distributor like A24, because everyone wants to sort of pretend that every single film they release is incredible, but they're just a distributor, remember? That's definitely
a deep dive.
A discussion for another day. So so we're going to leave you, Johnny, one more thing from you.
No, I was going to say, have we got any questions related to In Bruges that you want us to go through?
We actually haven't got any questions from In Bruges this week, but we have got some questions from our next film that we are looking at, which I'm actually really excited to discuss. One of my all-time favourites. So we decided this week to link it, and it links actually in quite a few ways, really. Same composer, Carter Burwell, and he does compose quite a lot of Coen Brothers films. So he's done the likes of Fargo, No Country for Old Men, True Grit. He's also done 3 Billboards, but he's also done the parent film this week, The Big Lebowski, 1998, directed and written by the Coen Brothers.
Wait, let me explain something to you. I am not Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude. You know, that or his dudeness.
Starring Jeff Bridges and John Goodman, Steve Buscemi. It's one of my all-time faves. Johnny, what did you think about it?
This is the first film that I've had to watch the podcast. Aside, I actually enjoyed more Wrecking Crew, and I think that is probably...
What?
Honestly, I'll tell you why. So
you're in so much trouble.
I'm in so much trouble, but I don't care. This is my thing. This is my takeaway from it. I have watched previous Coen Brothers films, so it's not an issue with the directing style. I've seen Fargo. I enjoy Fargo. My issue was I didn't like the character of the dude, which is sacrilege to so many people. But Jeff Bridges, instantly, I couldn't connect with him. I didn't find him a likable character. And the whole film is following him as a protagonist go from one situation to another. I should like this film, and I'll tell you why I should. Not only because of the writing and the direction of the Coen Brothers, which I do think is brilliant, I must say, even though I didn't like it myself, I don't not recognise the fact how good it is and what they're doing. But it's using the wrong man setup, which Hitchcock used so often, which I love and buy into every time. So on paper, this should be my ideal film, but sometimes...
I thought you'd love it,
you know, when some films just don't click with you, it just didn't click with me at all. But what I must say is the things I did get on with, we haven't really talked about the plot yet. Maybe we should talk about the plot, and then I can tell you what I did enjoy from it, and I can tell you more about what didn't click with me. So,
I mean, you've slightly touched on it. The plot is essentially it's a wrong man setup. It's about a sort of a bit of the dude, Jeff Lebowski. He's a slacker, and he likes bowling, he likes smoking weed, he likes White Russians. He's basically mistaken for another Jeffrey Lebowski, who's like a wheelchair-bound millionaire. He finds himself dragged into this sort of series of events involving it. So to be honest, what if I said to you, this is essentially like a high concept film noir? Like it's been compared to The Big Sleep.
Yeah, and again, I recognise what they are doing, and I think I've watched the exact same. Did you watch a film study on this by any chance?
No, I didn't watch a film study. I've read a bit about it, quite a bit about it.
So, yeah, I think my main issue, as I said, is I just didn't get on board with Jeff Bridges as the main character, and I think with a film like this, it's so reliant on you accepting him, and if you 100%. Don't accept him, you're not going to go with it. And Jeff Bridges' character, the whole film, it's trying to rile him in all these different situations, and he's not reacting. And I know the whole idea is, what's the phrase they say? Is it the dude?
The dude abides.
The dude abides. And the problem is, if you don't like the dude, you're not much asked if he's abiding. And I think that was my takeaway from it.
And you know what? Like I can totally understand that, because the film revolves around that character, and if he annoys you, or you just don't find him funny, or you don't get it, you're gonna hate it. You are gonna fully hate the film. I personally love it, and I think the Jeff Bridges character is absolutely hilarious. He's got a couple of friends. Walter, played by John Goodman, who John Goodman says that this is his this is the favourite character he's ever played in a film.
John Goodman is absolutely fantastic in this film. And what I did, I messaged Jamie afterwards, and he was gutted because I said I didn't enjoy this film. But what I really took away from it, when you have the trio together that you've just talked about, that when they're at the bowling alley, John Goodman's character is brilliant because all these characters are out of time, aren't they? So the dude is obsessed with like the 60s era of being the hippie mentality and that kind of thing. John Goodman's stuck in the Vietnam War, isn't he? Everything has to be linked back to the war.
He mentions being back in Nam so many times throughout the film, almost as many times as Jeff Bridges says man, which is 147 times.
That's more times than I've referenced Alien 3 on the podcast as well, so yeah.
I wondered when that would come in somewhere. That's good. So what about the cinematography, Johnny?
So again,
it's Roger Deakins.
It's a Roger Deakins film, but in my head it doesn't look like a Roger Deakins film. But I read about what he chose to do for the lighting, and he said he chose to make it so it looked more dirty and grimy. So for example, we were talking about in Full Metal Jacket last week, when the night scenes come on, it's a blue shade and blue tone to make it cool moonlight. This is the opposite. This is everything's lit up at night with horrible yellow yellow tungsten lights. And it makes the world look more grimy. I think that's the only way I can describe it. And that's what he presented. Yeah. But there are some trick sequences in the film. And one of them, I really like the fact that they had the camera as the bowling ball. And when and apparently what they had to do was add the holes in CGI on top afterwards. Because it was easy.
It's quite a famous scene. Like that's a famous scene. It was clever. I mean, there's many. We're not going to go into the second film that much because we never do. But if you haven't seen it, it's a full cult film, 100% cult film, and it's essentially just John Goodman being angry for
and it's hilarious.
An hour and 40 minutes, and he's absolutely hilarious.
I must say as well,
Jeff Bridges.
Philip Seymour Hoffman plays the Big Lebowski's.
Fantastic, isn't he?
Not butler. What is he? He's like his.
Well, it's kind of his like associate, isn't it? Like it's his like.
He's just brilliant. I should say the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, shouldn't I? But no, he's just absolutely fantastic. Yeah. The way, so the dude visits the other Lebowski, the Big Lebowski's house, and he's touching all the stuff on his wall, and there's this nervous laugh that Philip Seymour Hoffman does, and it just cracks me up because I don't know.
The dude's in this. He's in this really posh house, and he's wearing like jelly shoes.
Yeah.
And one thing I read that I thought was hilarious is that the majority of the clothes that the dude wears are actually Jeff Bridges' real clothes, and he has those jelly shoes and still wears them to this day.
Yeah, I'd seen that too. But another thing I'd seen as well, apparently, is when this film came out, it flopped, and then it was a cult film in terms of how it was received. It's become a cult film, sorry. And there was this cinema, when they were filming one of their more recent films, the Coen Brothers saw this cinema, and they said, "Oh, what's this about?" And it was basically every single evening the cinema in America played The Big Lebowski, and they had a group of people who would go every single night with the jelly shoes on and with the dude's outfit on, and the dude abides mentality just stuck with them, and it was a cult thing. And this lady who saw them didn't know they were the Coen Brothers. She said, "Oh, you should come along. It's really fun. It's really weird."
Yeah. I think this is ultimately quotable. It's full of like immortal lines. I just fall in love with it. The soundtrack, the style of it, the tone of it. I think everything about it.
What you've just said though about the tone is what I couldn't deal with. I think we've chatted a bit about this when we talked about Dr. Strangelove at the start. Everyone in this film is extra kooky or quirky. And I think for me, I can deal with a few kooky or quirky characters, but when everyone's super heightened, I found that it's a bit like when I watched some of the Wes Anderson films have that for me. Sometimes he balances it just right. They do, yeah. Other times it definitely goes, it becomes too much. And I
can understand that.
They're incredibly heightened, is what I'm trying to say. It's like a heightened version of someone. If someone's got a character trait, it's to the nth degree of that character trait. There's no subtlety there for me, but I think that's the point.
Absolutely.
That is the point.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And John, like, well enough to know, like, that is the point. If you don't like the dude, you're not going to like the film. The film is iconic. There's a yearly dude festival. Did you know that?
No, I didn't. But sorry,
it's a yearly festival. Yeah.
The other thing I should have mentioned as well, though, is I do know as well from the Coen Brothers that the fact they do always make films that subvert expectations, and the eccentric characters are part of that. But what I was going to say was the film feels like it's building up to a climax and it doesn't really have it. And again, this is my fault because I, for the whole film, was expecting, I don't know, just it to go a certain way, and it didn't do it, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
But again, because it didn't. Because, we never see the whole film revolves around the dude being at the bowling alley, but we never see the dude bowl. It's like a really interesting point, and the film ends before you see him bowling again. But I just, in my head, it was building up towards some competition or something. I don't know. There's loads of stuff happens. Like, he gets drugged. Like, there's a big twist. I don't know. I know what you're saying. And the other thing I think I just love that style of Coen Brothers writing. They write comedy in such a way. And do you know what? When I was watching In Bruges, I really do find these two films. This is the perfect example of the difference between pure dark British humor and that sort of like quirky American humor. They are 100%. So that is like they go hand in hand together. But they're also so different. Do you know, I think that was the other mistake I made, which is I watched In Bruges on the Friday night and then I watched this the following day. And I think, think with the greatest respect, I think some people will probably prefer Big Lebowski a lot more to In Bruges, and that's also fine. But for me... Oh, they absolutely will. Because In Bruges clicked with me so much, and as we've talked about, had so many layers to it. I found it really hard then to watch Big Lebowski, where for me it seemed... quite one note, and as we said, the key thing for me is if you don't like the central character, it's very difficult to then go through a whole 2-hour film or whatever it is getting on board with that. So like a peek behind the curtain actually for like the listeners is that we originally started this with the intention of having the episode as the Big Lebowski, and even me being a huge fan of Big Lebowski, once I'd watched it I was like, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to like analyze this in such a way for so long? Whereas when I'd watched In Bruges, I was like, right, there's so much more depth to this. There's so much more we can explore. So actually, I think we need to flip it. I actually love both films. I probably prefer In Bruges slightly more because I think the script and it's maybe tighter. The pure Britishness of it is just tighter, and it is, I think it's more clever and funnier. That's just my opinion. But anyway, so that's our pairing this week. Go and watch them both. I'm sure you'll love them. Johnny didn't. We move on. Anyway, so we do have some listener questions about the Big Lebowski. So, well, we've got more of a comment from Finding Film. Is it bad? I want to live my life in the way of the dude. A true inspiration. And I've got to say, I think we all have been living our life like the dudes during lockdown because there's been nothing else to do. He's not a bad person, is he? No, he's not. And he's actually like, he's certainly not a bad person. I understand what you mean, like chilling around, watching TV. Sounds pretty cool to me. Going bowling. Yeah, I would love that too. I just, as long as your apartment's not like his, because his apartment made me feel slightly on edge. It just needs a good hoover. Yeah, it's filth. And I mean, probably the most important question of the week: did the rug tie the room together or not? It did tie the room together, to be fair, didn't it? I mean, they mentioned it about 5 times. It must have tied the room together. It absolutely had to have tied the room together. Big Al writes in and he asks, what film are you surprised that the other hasn't seen yet? So I was really surprised. I know we chatted about Stanley Kubrick last week, but I was quite amazed that Jamie hadn't actually seen 2001: Space Odyssey. Now, I know he has an aversion to, in general, doesn't always enjoy the slower films, but in terms of pure cinematography and being visually stunning, and the fact he has the 4K Blu-ray, so there's no excuse, that film is just stunning. Even if you're not fully on board with it, the runtime's actually not that long. Is it only 2 hours 27 minutes or something? And I think it's only 2 hours in my head. Well, I have to, maybe I should check that before I say it. Anyway, I was just amazed you hadn't seen it, because you are all for an aesthetically pleasing film, let's say. Oh no, I absolutely am, and it's so on my list. Like, oh, by the way, just so you know, 2001 was 149 minutes. Oh, what did I say? 227? Oh no, I meant 2 hours 27. 149 minutes. That's quite a long time. So the thing that puts me off about 2001 is that I've heard
it has pretty much zero plot. And is that true?
2001 has a very thin plot, but the idea is it's in old science fiction, it's the deeper themes and the meanings that you're supposed to take from it. So some people are into that, or some people aren't into that. But the difference is, before 2001's sci-fi on the whole, aside from Forbidden Planet, was hokey, cheaply done. Kubrick made the gold standard. To this day, it stands up as the gold standard of what sci-fi should look like. It all made sense. The fact that he had guys from NASA were actually advising them on what they think things will be like in X amount of years. Obviously, it's not all coming to pass, but everything makes sense. And that's why it's just brilliant. And again, we wouldn't have had... Star Wars was taking that and putting it the other way and making a used future, but this was super, super clean. What if we went next year? What would it look like? Star Wars and Alien was that space technology's 200 years old and we've been using it over and over again, and it's so normal we don't treat it nice anymore, and it's dirty. The only bit in Alien that looks like 2001 would be the hospital wing, which is all clean and white. And
yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, so from my point of view, I've slowly been bullying Johnny over the last few weeks to watch films that he hadn't seen that I wanted him to see, such as Dirty Dancing. What else have I made you see that you hadn't? No, there's been a few over the last few weeks.
Well, to be fair,
Dirty Dancing.
Most of the films on the podcast we've done so far, to be fair. I haven't.
Yeah, so...
Aside from Seven, I'm trying to remember every film we've done so far, but on the whole, most of the films we've watched for the pod have been for the first time, actually. Even the links.
Yeah, so I've been trying really hard to make Johnny watch, or not make him, but get Johnny to watch films he hadn't seen. Films that I couldn't necessarily say I'm surprised. Films that I'm desperate for him to see: Roadhouse, which he still hasn't seen; Ghost World; Lost in Translation; desperate for him to see The Handmaiden; desperate for him to see Uncle Buck. There's a lot of films on. I've got a watch list here ready for him, and yeah, The Apartment is another one that I'd really love him to see. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. I promise you. The next question is from Views by Quinn, a friend. He's really funny. He does lots of reviews on Instagram as well. You can find him there. What's a director, actor, and genre combination you've always wanted to see? Now, would you like me to go first? Because I've got this definitely all nailed down. So I've done this before, right? And I've not just gone for that. I've gone for the writer as well, cinematographer. I've gone for the soundtrack as well. So yeah, I have. Yeah, it's just something I did. So the director, I'd gone for William Friedkin. Now I haven't mentioned him a lot on the pod, but I really, really love William Friedkin's style. He obviously he's most famous for The Exorcist. He's done an amazing film called Sorcerer, which doesn't get anywhere near as much love as it should. But he's also got this like Coen Brothers-esque style that he did a film called Killer Joe, which is really, he knows how to write like dark humor, black comedy, that kind of thing. So as well as that, he's done a film called Cruising with Al Pacino. So when I take all that into account, the actors I would love to star, Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Gosling, and you're going to see where this is going very quickly. Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Gosling. For the female part of that, I'd have Nicole Kidman and Charlize Theron. And the writer, I'm going to have Lee Whannell, who wrote one of my favorite films, Upgrade, and The Invisible Man. And the cinematographer is obviously going to be Roger Deakins. And we're talking a dark neo-noir thriller. That's where I'm going with that. And so take from that what you will. Think about Blade Runner / Drive / Nightcrawler style vibe. And then when you think about the soundtrack, you want to be thinking of maybe something like synthwave 80s gunship style music. And that is my dream.
Like our intro.
Exactly like our intro. I actually messaged Gunship and asked them if we could use one of their tracks for our intro. And they didn't respond, which, come on, guys.
One day.
I know you listen. I know all these listen. Well, all three is listen every week. Just, come on, give me a break.
I was going to say for my film, I would like, and there's rumours this will be happening, the cast is already set because they're already there, but there's rumours for a while about Tarantino doing a Star Trek film, but it was originally as just a...
You would like
the
that?
writer. Yeah, I would love to see someone do something totally different. I'll tell you why. I don't talk much about Star Trek on the pod because I'm sure it's not of mass interest to people. But what I would say is recently they've really pushed out with trying to do different things. So they've got multiple series going on and it kind of caters for here's your action audience, here's your intellectual audience. And they've done a show that's quite like Rick and Morty called Lower Decks. Lower Decks showed me, I always thought the idea of making a comedy from Star Trek was sacrilege because it's serious and it should be taken seriously and you can't joke about it. And I really love that series, and that's proved to me that someone can come and do something, and if it's done well, it can be totally different, but I'll buy into it. And if anyone can do that, I believe Tarantino can make an original series Star Trek film and do something which completely, as we've talked about, subverts my expectations. And it won't end with a giant light beam in the sky or blowing up the Enterprise for the 6th time in however many films or whatever. I just think if anyone could do it differently, it would be him. And he is obsessed with that era and he knows the characters. I know he knows them. And
he knows it inside out.
Yeah, and
he absolutely does.
He's so passionate when he talks about it. I don't know, for me, that's what I'd like. But I know that's
is the scary. So when I first heard that, I was like, right. So I like the new trilogy in terms, like the Star Trek films. Mm-hmm. When I say new trilogy, the one from like, what was it, 2007?
A while ago, I think. Yeah, it's
Chris Pine.
Yeah.
So I love that. I am not the biggest fan of. I quite like Star Trek. I can sit and watch it, like absolutely fine. I do find it a little bit boring at times. It's kind of like the less cool version of Star Wars, I feel. I'm really sorry for Star Trek fans. I watch it and I enjoy it. Like, so I'm not having a dig. I'm just saying there's usually less action. It's far more campy. But what I think the Star Trek fans were freaking out about when that came to light was that Tarantino's gonna do something totally different, like you said, which I would love personally. I think it would be incredible.
I think I would.
What if he makes it? What if he makes it Star Trek? It's an 18. Well, it's an 18, and you've got like Leonardo DiCaprio as Captain Kirk, which would be amazing. By the way, I'm just gonna say that it would be amazing. I've just thought of that on the spot right now, but that would be amazing.
Brad Pitt, if you're going for someone as Kirk, he's got more of it about it. But no, what I would say is if there's a logic and a reason for it, if they pick a dark story and there's a reason for it, it can work.
Oh, you're getting me excited, man, actually. Genuinely, you're getting me excited for it.
Someone's had this debate before, and they've talked about how, again, sorry for people who aren't into Star Trek, the original Star Trek series, on the whole, it's like horror. They find something horrific happens, usually a load of people die, then they have to stop it before it kills lots of other people. So, actually,
I mean, it's horror, but it's like... it's like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, of that era. But what I'm saying is, people went mad when Discovery was one of the most recent Star Trek series, and I think, Jamie, you'd thoroughly enjoy that because it's much more like Star Trek 2009 and it's darker in tone.
I've seen the first season.
Yeah, I really enjoy that show. I think it's brilliant. But what I was going to say was, you can have dark stories in Star Trek and they work if they're done well and they have the right context. If they're truly lost and out there in a part where there's no rule and they have to break the rules to get out of the scenario,
I'd love it.
You know, I think it'd be really good. And just, I don't know,
I would love it.
Tarantino would embrace all the elements that others might shy away from. And yes, he might introduce super violence into it, but more so, he will allow the Trekkie talky bits. You know,
he understands. He does really understand. He just understands
it. But
he gets it.
Enough on Star Trek.
Yeah. Do you know what? I will just finish with, like, I actually mentioned to Quinn, who wrote in the other day, that we were talking about DC, like the DC universe and the Snyder Cut Justice League, and how we think the DC universe needs to be rebooted and stuff. Like, it needs new directors and stuff. I'm like, yeah, I would actually like to see a Scorsese directed DC, like, sort of like set in Gotham City that doesn't focus on this, like, the superheroes are just side characters. It just focuses on the gangsters.
Well, you know, originally Scorsese was supposed to direct Joker, wasn't he? Initially, we were told it was like him and Leonardo DiCaprio was what we were promised.
Well, it's a good job he didn't, isn't it? Because
Todd Phillips, Joaquin Phoenix, but you know, I've got nothing.
We spoke about this before.
Yeah,
it's such a rip. It's such a rip of King of Comedy and Taxi Driver.
It is, but I think I was speaking to someone about this recently, and they raised a valid point, which was actually maybe it's to introduce people who hadn't seen those films, though, these ideas, and maybe they'll go back and watch them for it. And I think maybe we can't always say, oh, that's taking that from that. It's like, it is, but if it's building on it enough and it then makes them say, I want to know more, like let me know more about the King comedy, let me know more about this film. If it gets people to delve into it, then I think that's okay. But it's a thin line. I know it's a thin line.
I really like, so don't get me wrong, like I walked out of the cinema really loving Joker. I really liked it, but knowing what the King of Comedy is, it's not a broadly seen Scorsese film. A lot of people haven't seen King of Comedy. Most people have seen Taxi Driver. With King of Comedy, though, like, have you seen it, Johnny? By the way,
no, I haven't. I've only seen Taxi Driver.
Right.
I haven't seen King of Comedy.
So watch it, right? And when I tell you now that it really does cheapen Joker because it's almost a play by play. It's really, really like it. In Joker's still good separately. It's fine. But it's just an absolute copy without being called King of Comedy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, again, it's hard for me to comment until I've watched it. When I've watched it, it'd be interesting to go back to that. But there are so many films that exist because they are effectively building on, let's say, rather than directly copying ideas and going that next level. Because I love the chase scene in North by Northwest in the fields, but I know for a fact it was in a previous film and Hitchcock took it, and then again in From Russia with Love they replicated it because it was in North by Northwest. So there is a cycle of building on these things, but that's
one sequence or a whole film.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, right, so last question. We've got a double barrel question. So Patch writes in to MoviesinaPODshell@gmail.com, just like you can, and he says, pod question, it's a two-parter. Part 1, when/if cinemas ever reopen, what would be the first movie you see, new or old?
So I really hope there's going to be a theatrical IMAX release of Justice League, because I think this links into the second part of the question, but I'm all for the fact that we are now at a point where we can pay a cinema ticket admission from home and watch things at home, but I still personally want to see things at the cinema, and what I want to see is Justice League on an IMAX screen because it's in a 4:3 format, and the reason it's in a 4:3 format is because that's for IMAX, but unfortunately I don't have an IMAX screen at home, so I would...
Almost.
No, so I quite like to actually see it the way, the classic phrase, but I'd like to see it the way the director intended, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and so I actually almost lived out my dream. Remember that time when COVID hit, but then it all looked like it was going to recover and cinemas were opening and it was eat out to help out and me and you were going out for beers until 10 o'clock. Oh, those were the days. Anyway, I actually went cinema. I've got a unlimited pass, like no bragging or anything. I'm just saying. So I'll go and watch like pretty much whatever I can. And at that time, they started bringing out the Back to the Future films, Jurassic Park, but they were showing Goodfellas, and I went and seen Goodfellas, which, as you know, in my top 3, went and seen Goodfellas in the cinema, which I'd never seen, which was actually incredible. If I'm going to pick some, I won't pick some any new films, but I will pick some old ones. I mean, I'd love to see Terminator 2 at the cinema. I think that would be amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to see Upgrade in the cinema. I never got to see that. I mentioned it earlier on the pod. I guess I'd really love to see In a Lonely Place or On the Waterfront. Those type of old films, they have that romance. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
no, 100%. I was going to say, though, we were talking the other week about Swords and Sandal films and that era where Hollywood just slapped all the budget on making it as big a cinematic experience as possible. All those 70mm films, like, I'd love to have seen Lawrence of Arabia at the cinema because that film is beautiful. But imagine
70mm as well.
Yeah, imagine seeing that in all its glory. I saw...
Restored, yeah.
I was lucky enough to see... It wasn't a digital restoration. A few years ago, Christopher Nolan re-released 2001: A Space Odyssey and oversaw the 70mm prints, which basically they were the original 70mm prints. One of the original 70mm prints was taken and restored, cleaned up, and then when you went to see it at the cinema, it was still on film. It wasn't a digital clean-up version, it was the thing.
Yeah.
And I went to see that in Australia, and honestly, again, minimal plot or not, it was just stunning, and I saw it on a screen so huge, and it was just stunning. And again, that for me is there's certain films which are just an audiovisual experience you can't replicate at home projector, big TV, whatever, you just can't do it unless you're in a cinema. And that was it.
Nice segue into our next into the part 2 of the question. And then Patch says, has COVID killed cinema, and is home streaming the future as technology gets better? You're shaking your head already. Sorry, has COVID killed cinema, and is home streaming the future as technology gets better?
I think, again, there's 2 points to this, as we just said with the Justice League thing. I'm happy to pay to watch Justice League at home because at the moment we can't go to the cinema. But
are you happy to pay £20?
Well, it's going to be at least £15, isn't it, realistically?
£15, because I'm certainly not.
I think the logic of that is, though, if we're not in a... again, sorry to mention pandemic, we always try and usually avoid it, but in the scenario we're in at the moment, we can't gather indoors and we can't watch things together. The logic of that price tag of £20 or £15 is your whole family watch it, or you get people round. And if you said to me, Johnny, I'm coming around, let's watch Justice League together tonight, you sort out the rental, then I'd do it. You bring the beers, I'll sort the rental.
You know, $7.50 each. You sort out the rental, I'll sort out the pizza.
Yeah. No, but that's,
do you know what I mean?
And that for me is probably the way it will go eventually, because Disney's already trialled it with Mulan, which Jamie's made his views about very clear on his...
Don't start me on them. So, yeah, carry on, and I'll...
But what I would say is, because of what's happened over the past 18 months, we've had to get to this point for the cinemas to make money, because there's films like The Invisible Man, which had a very limited release and got cut off, and then they released it on things like Virgin Media and Sky Store or whatever, and you paid for it to make the money back. Wonder Woman's been released this way. Black Widow, I thought they were going to, but maybe they're holding off. But the point is, for me, there's a lot I like about the home viewing experience. I like the fact I can pause it. I like the fact
there's no one kicking your chair.
There's no one kicking my chair.
You like the fact there's no one got their phone out. Yeah,
I have it, and there are those aspects of it. But if I want to also have that experience, I know there's certain cinemas at certain times I can go to have that experience as well. Is that fair? And I think if I go to something like the Everyman Cinema, it's not the biggest screen, but it's quite a select group, and because it's not particularly cheap to get in, the people who are there who've paid want to watch the film. So I know I'm not going to have to be worrying about someone talking through it or looking at the phone, or that's my takeaway from that. I don't think cinema is dead, but what I've said to Jamie over the past 18 months, we've talked about this a lot. I say 18 months, it's actually really a year, but we've said a lot. The cinemas are going to be few and far between because it's not going to be cost effective to run them. So I think it's either going to be an indie place, which, you know, let's say if there's 6 indie places, there's 1 left, and that is the one destination you go to. I think the Electric's lucky in the Midlands because isn't it the oldest in the UK, so it will always have that tag and people will go for that.
Yeah,
is that correct? And then
it's the oldest in the UK.
Yeah. So then other cinemas, the chains, I don't think there'll be as many. I just don't think there'll be as many people about going. Trolls 2, loads of people have downloaded Trolls 2 last year, and it grossed so much money.
Trolls World Tour grossed 100 million.
Right. So on that basis, think about how much cheaper it probably was for distribution to go straight onto Sky Store than it is for them to send it around to all these cinemas, etc.
Johnny's heard off me for about a year, and as has everyone else that knows me, because I get quite unreasonably annoyed at some of these streaming companies, most notably Disney. Like I will go off on Disney because they're the easiest to target at the moment. They present themselves as a magical children's company that really cares about the consumer, but actually, like, they're the biggest money grabbing, like, consumer hating company out there, because they literally just all they want to do is nickel and dime everyone, and they'd rather sort of, if they can get a bigger slice of the pie, which I understand they're a business, I fully get it, but they put Mulan on for £25, right? £25, but you don't get it. So if you've got Disney Plus, you don't get it. You get Disney Plus, you've got to buy Disney Plus and pay £25. You can't just pay £25 or have Disney Plus. It's ridiculous. So at this point now, they're exploiting the consumer. And so people argue that, and I mentioned earlier, I don't like having the back of my chair kicked. No, I don't. I don't like having, I really, really hate when people get their phone out because they're not watching the film. I do remember when I went to see Captain Marvel, there was a row of people in front of me, like, all getting their phones out, Snapchatting the entrance to the end, like the opening credits of the film. And the reason they're doing that is simply just so they can show people that they are watching the film, like, and show off. Like, that drives me nuts. At the same time, there's loads of independent cinemas out there that are really, really important and show really, really important films. I think that streaming streaming obviously has got bigger, and it eventually will be the majority. I don't think cinemas will die. Like Johnny said, I think that there's going to be far less of the chains. They'll like at this moment in time, some of them are stones throw away, aren't they? Like we're in the West Midlands, and there's probably like 5 miles in each direction, and so there'll definitely be a lot less. I just think it's really sad that it's going this way, and to experience film properly, I really think you need a huge screen, massive speakers in a darker room. And you can tell me what you want. I have seen the argument of, oh wow, I have a 50-inch telly and 7.1 surround sound. I don't care what you've got in your house, right? You could have a $7,000 telly, right? And you can have a $10,000 surround sound. I don't even know if they exist, right? You could have all that, and I'm telling you, your experience.
I said they probably do. You can spend as much as you want hi-fi and surround sound if you've got a number.
You are not getting IMAX, or you're not getting a normal. You're not getting what you get at the cinema, and that's all I'm saying.
The truth is, if you wanted to scratch the surface of getting a true cinematic experience, you would be looking at thousands of pounds and not far off like 10 grand. Honestly, like me.
Oh, absolutely.
So without getting too into it, me and Jamie are into our hi-fi and into our home cinema setups, and both of us, I'd say, have relatively modest home cinema setups. They're not,
modest.
I mean, they're not.
I would say you and I have probably got better than most.
Okay. The truth is, as much as I enjoy having, I'm lucky. I have a projector which I bought years ago, and I've got a 5.1 surround setup. I love it, but it's still not the same, because the truth is I can't crank it up to the same level the cinema can either. I live in a block of flats. Do you know what I mean? So again, I'm not getting the true, inverted commas, cinema experience. Jamie laughs at me because when it's winter, everyone gets really miserable, but I get happy because I call it projector season, because it gets dark at 5 o'clock, so I can sit through 2 films and it not be too late in the evening to annoy people. So you can turn the dynamic range completely off and have it as it is in the cinema with it on full.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to summer and you start the films later, you end up putting the dynamic range so it's not as loud and jumpy in the evenings.
What I will say is that, again, streaming, right? You're paying £15, £20, or however much it is. You're paying all this money, and stream you're getting all depends on, one, your internet. You can have the fastest internet in the world, by the way, and you're still not going to download that at the same speed that a Blu-ray is going to play at, or you're seeing off a projector. So the quality is just not as good as you think it is.
But I suppose it's what people care about, because for people who are into
I'm a snob.
Yes, for people who are into the hi-fi or into physical media, you're going to pay for that. But for people who aren't into that, I suppose they don't mind. But to give you a baseline, if you have a 4K stream on Netflix or on Amazon Prime or on Disney is still less data per second and less resolution than you would get on a Blu-ray. So it's not 4K. It's a 4K stream, but it's not 4K. It's. I have to try and get this into people. It's that resolution, but the codec is so compressed that it's not true 4K. If you get a 4K
and it will look great.
Yeah.
It will still look great, but you will be missing so much detail. Like I say, like this is only for the enthusiasts.
100%.
Like me and Johnny are enthusiasts. Do you know what I mean? We spend I don't know 12 hours between us a week, like watching films and editing a podcast. So we obviously are enthusiasts. But yeah, at the end of the day, the detail isn't as. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm a snob. I'm a massive snob.
Basically, it's cheesy, but there are faults with going to the cinema. But we love the experience enough that it's worth the effort. That's the way I sign it off.
The pure romance of cinema. As per usual, guys, that's us done for the week. Please, we love it when you go on those Apple iTunes or whatever it is you do. I don't have an Apple phone, so I can't even tell you. But if you're listening on Apple, just go to our podcast. And please, we only accept 5-star ratings. So go give us a 5-star rating. That'd be absolutely lovely. Get us to the top. Get us to, the top 100. I'd be happy with that. Top 100 film podcasts. Would you be happy with that, Johnny? Do you reckon we could get there?
If we get there, I'd be very happy right now. I'd take that.
Yeah, come on. Give us a 5-star rating. I would love that. And as always, thank you so much for listening. You can find me at Movies in a Nutshell on Instagram, and you can find Johnny
at jcb.video.
Thank you very much, and see you all later.